はい、今日ですね、メッセージに入っていきたいと思うんですが、創世記シリーズは、ある意味先週で終わってます。でも今日のメッセージでまとめていきたいと思います。
And so, just getting into the message. So up until now, we've been doing a series in Genesis, which actually ended last week, but we'd like to kind of just wrap it up and sum everything up with today's message.
はい、そして来週はメンバーシップのことをやるので、メンバーシップについてそういうことをメッセージします。そしてイースター。そしてその後にですね、また新しいシリーズを始める予定です。なので楽しみにしていてください。
And so, and then starting next week, we're going to have the membership meeting that you've probably heard about, and then after that is Easter, and then after that we'll be starting a new series.
はい、でも今日はですね、ヘブル人の手紙、ヘブル書の11章、有名な箇所ですけども、信仰についての、箇所を読んでいきたいと思います。
Today we will be looking at Hebrews, kind of a famous passage in Hebrews, chapter 11, 1 through 7.
はい、創世記って書いてありますけど、創世記じゃないです。ヘブル人の手紙です。
It says Genesis, but it's Hebrews today.
でも創世記の人物たちが登場します。もちろん。
But all of the Genesis people come out in this verse.
はい、1節からですね、7節まで読んでいきたいと思います。
So 1 through 7.
はい、じゃあ日本語だけで読みますので、英語の方は自分の聖書を開くか、このスクリーンを見てほしいなと思います。
And as always, we're just going to be reading in Japanese only, so if you're an English speaker, you can either follow along on the screen here or in your own Bible.
はい、じゃあ一節から。さて、信仰は望んでいることを保証し、目に見えないものを確信させるものです。昔の人たちはこの信仰によって称賛されました。信仰によって私たちはこの世界が神の言葉で作られたことを悟り、その結果、目に見えるものが目に見えないものからできたのではないことを悟ります。信仰によってアベルはカインよりも優れた生贄を捧げ、その生贄によって彼が正しい人であることが証しされました。神が神の捧げ物を良い捧げ物だと、証ししてくださったからです。彼は死にましたが、その信仰によって今もなお語っています。信仰によってエノクは死を見ることがないように移されました。神が彼を移されたのでいなくなりました。彼が神に喜ばれていたことは移される前から証しされていたのです。信仰がなければ神に喜ばれることはできません。神に近づく者は神がおられること、神がご自分を求める者には報いてくださる方であることを信じなければならないのです。信仰によってノアはまだ見ていない事柄について神から警告を受けたとき、恐れかしこんで家族の救いのために箱舟を作り、その信仰によって世を罪ありとし、信仰による義を受け継ぐものとなりました。はい、今日信仰について語っていきます。
So today we're going to be talking about faith.
でも同時に創世記の内容のまとめでもあります。
And at the same time, it is also kind of a summing up of all of the Genesis series that
もう
we've
す
been
で
doing.
にこの箇所を読んでて、なんか創世記の概念が載ってるなって気づいてると思います。
I think you guys might have realized already there's a lot of the things we've talked about in Genesis that come out in this passage.
はい、なので3つのことを通して、やっていきます。
So there are 3 points again that we're going to talk about today.
まず最初、信仰は理にかなったものということが1つ目。
And so the first one is that faith is like a reasonable, logical thing.
はい、2つ目、信仰は個人的なものです。
And then second is that faith is also a personal thing.
そして、信仰3つ目は、radical、要は大胆なものです。
And then the third one is that faith is like a bold and radical thing.
はい、まず最初ね、1つ目のポイントから入っていきます。
And so let's just get started with the first point.
はい、皆さん信仰ってね、よく聞きますよね。クリスチャンじゃない方も聞きますけども、どういうイメージがありますか
？What kind of image do you guys have of faith? I think Christians and non-Christians alike, we hear the word faith a lot.
ね、もちろん宗教的な、ね、リンクが一番強いかもしれません。
Probably like the connection to something religious is probably the strongest link.
またはビジネスや自己啓発、セルフモーティブなんていうんですね、セルフヘルプみたいな、そういう世界でもよく信仰みたいな概念はありますよね。
Yeah, I think there's also a lot of connection to just like business stuff or like self-help, self-enlightenment type stuff.
ね、なんか夢見ているもの、達成可能だってものをなんか達成する、できるんだって信じる心とか、よくそういう風に使います。
Yeah, like a lot of self-help stuff. There's always like the, just take hold of your dream and like enlighten yourself and achieve it. Like a lot of that kind of talk.
大概の場合、宗教に関連づけると、信仰というものはある意味盲目的なもの、何の根拠もなしに信じるような、そのような、結構現代ではちょっとスピリチュアルすぎるんじゃないのって、そんな風にとらわれてしまいますよね。
And whether it's like a religious thing or not, kind of the modern take on faith is kind of this kind of blind approach of like just take it and like go after it and try to achieve and like believe in yourself kind of
ね、
idea.
科学やまたは合理的なものとは分離された概念として捉えられているかもしれませ
Yeah,
ん。
there's this kind of idea nowadays that faith is totally separate from like science or any kind of way to like have a conviction about the thing you have faith in.
でもまず最初に言いたいことは、クリスチャンの信仰、神に対する信仰はそういう盲目的なもの、非合理的なものじゃありません。
Yeah, so, but what we want to talk about today is how faith actually does have a reasonableness to it, and it's not just like this random, blindly believing something that you can't prove or anything like that.
なぜそれがわかるんでしょうか。
So, how can we know that?
はい、まず一節では信仰は望んでいることの保証っていう言葉が使われています。保証。
So, the first one is that we can see in verse 1 of this passage that there's this word assurance that comes out.
はい、このギリシャ語のオリジナルの意味はですね、土台っていう意味があるんです。
Yeah, the original kind of Greek meaning of this word assurance was actually the word foundation.
要は土台って例えば家だとかの土台って、ね、土台は見えないですよね。でも確実にそこに何かが支えるものがあり、家ができるわけです。
Yeah, and like for example with a house, there's always a foundation to the house, and when the house is done, you can't see it, but it's something that is necessary to be there for the house to be built and for it to exist.
そしてその後にまた目に見えないものを確信させる、英語で言うとコンビクションってありますね。
Yeah, and then we also have the kind of part where it says the conviction of things not seen.
はい、実はまたこれもギリシャ語の意味で言うとエビデンス、証拠、proof っていう意味なんです。
Yeah, but the original Greek for this, or Greek Hebrew, original word is yeah, like more of like an evidence or proof.
どういう証拠があるんでしょうか、じゃあ。
And so what kind of like proof is this?
信仰がどのように証拠になっていくんでしょうか。
Yeah, like how can you have faith in something that's like proven already? Like what is this proof?
はい、そこで3節にかかってきます。いきなりなんか創世記一章の概念が出てきますね。この世界、要はこのユニバース、この宇宙は目に見えない存在、要は神の言葉によってできたんだって悟るって書いてありますよね。どういう意味なんでしょうか。
And so for that, we're going to have to look at verse 3 where it says like the universe was made out of the word of God, out of these things that are not visible, and all of this, like it kind of connects back to Genesis. And so what is this all about?
そしてまた6節見てみると2つのこと言ってます。信仰は2つのことを信じなくちゃいけない。何ですか？神が存在すること。そして神様が神を求めるものを報いてくださること、この2つが書かれています。
And then also if we look at verse 6, it says that there's these two important things that you have to believe to have faith, which are believing that God actually exists in the first place and that he also rewards those who have faith in him.
はい、まず信仰、これ当たり前ですよね。神がいることを実在することを確信持たなくちゃいけないってことです。
Yeah, so the first kind of obvious thing with having faith in God is you have to have an actual confidence that he is a real existing person. He's actually there. You have to have that faith.
もう
to
いき
start
な
off.
りいきなりじゃあ証拠どこにあるのってなりませんか。
Yeah, so like, well, kind of just right off the bat, like, well, where's the proof of that? You might be thinking.
はい、神がいるいないってことをもう話しましたよ、創世記で。
Yeah, so we talked a lot about already in Genesis, like the idea of like God existing or not.
でも神がいるってことで合理的な理由ができ始めていきます。
Yeah, but from that, we actually see that there is kind of like a reasonable foundation for like showing how like that God exists.
はい、例えば神様がいなかったらどうなるって言いました。
So, for example, if there is no God, then what happens?
神様がいなかったら、例えば一つ目、これ哲学的に言いますけど、物事の良し悪しを決めることができないんです。
Yeah, so we talked about this earlier, but kind of the idea of like if there is no God, then the whole kind of being able to decide whether something is good or not, like that completely goes away. We can't
Good or
decide
bad, ne?
yeah, any good or bad of anything.
はい、例えばこのように考えてください。私たちの存在、人間としての良い人間、悪い人間ってどうやって決めるんでしょうか。
So, for example, with humans, how do we decide who's a good human, who's a bad human?
またはこの iPhone がいい iPhone か悪い iPhone かってどうやって決めるんでしょうか。
Or how do we like decide if this is a good or bad iPhone?
何の基準を根拠に決めるんでしょうか。
Like what kind of like basis or what kind of standard do you evaluate the good or badness of an iPhone on?
例えばね、僕がねこれ iPhone を持って、なんていうの、家の改装に使おうとします。
So, for example, let's say Ryuta Sensei wants to renovate his house using his iPhone.
はい。そして僕がいきなりこの iPhone でね、釘をバーンバーンバーンってやって壊れちゃったとしましょう。
And so so he takes the iPhone and he uses it as a hammer and he starts hammering all these nails in his house to renovate it.
そして僕こう言います。これ最悪の iPhone。釘も打てないって文句言ったとしましょう。
And then he just says like, "This is the worst iPhone ever. I can't nail anything with this. This is the worst."
それが iPhone の基準でしょうか。
So is that the standard for evaluating the goodness or badness of
違い
an
ますね。
iPhone?
iPhone は釘を打つためにデザインされてないんですよ。
No, that's not what iPhones were designed for.
iPhone は、いろんなことをやるためにデザインされてますけど、まずアプリを入れて電話できて、インターネット検索できて、そういうデジタル専用でできてるわけですよね。
Yeah, as we know, iPhone is more designed for specific things like getting all these different apps on your phone, doing like calling people and doing a lot of stuff on the internet. It's like a digital-based thing. It's not for hammering nails.
だから僕がハンマーとして使う、ことしようとしてること自体おかしいわけですよ。
And so it's just really strange to then take something that you know what the design is for and then use it for hammering nails.
要はそこに目的とデザインがあって初めてよし悪しを決めれるわけです。言ってるの分かりますか？
Having a purpose and a design is then from that we're then able to decide the good or bad of something.
人間も同じです。
And so humans are the same.
そうですね。私たちの人間の良し悪し、誰が決めるんでしょうか？
Who decides like the good or bad of humanity? Like who is a good
もう
person
す
or
で
bad
に
person?
目的とデザイン、ブループリントがあって初めて人間の良し悪しを決められるわけです。
Yeah, and as we talked about in a few messages ago, like there's this idea of having a blueprint, having an original design or purpose that is decided for us, that helps decide who is a good person or who's
で
a bad
も
person.
今の現代の世の中、昔もそうでしたけども、神がいないとしてしまっていることによって人間の良し悪しを自分たちで勝手に決めているわけですよね。
Yeah, and for example, like if we say that there's no God, if a lot of people in the past they would act as if there's no God, then they would then have to determine that good or bad on their own.
どうやって決めてきましたか？
And then how did they do that?
お金を持ってる持ってない。
And they'd be like, oh, if you're rich or not.
ハンサム、美人じゃない。
Yeah, if you're
Vision.
good looking or not.
ハンマー打てる打てない。
Yeah, if you can hit the nail in or
大学
not.
行ってる行ってない。
Yeah, if you went to college or not.
そんなことで人間の良し悪し決まるんでしょうか？
And so can we actually determine the good or bad of a person through those things?
はっきり言います。神を信じていないなら、あなたの良し悪しも自分で分かってないんです。
Yeah, I think to say clearly, if you don't think there's a God, if you don't know God, then you can't decide the good or bad.
でも
You
自
cannot
分を
decide
間違
that.
ったものに使って自分を悪い、いいって勝手に基準で自分を判断している幻想に過ぎないんですよ。
Yeah, like you're just kind of determining good or bad for yourself, but you don't actually have like a clear objective picture of what that is, and you're just deciding for yourself, just kind of arbitrarily.
要はもうそこでこれも哲学的な論点から言ってますけども、神がいないということ自体でもうすでに信仰が成り立たないわけですよ。
Yeah, and so this is kind of a philosophical thing, but basically the idea is that if there is no God, then there's no idea for faith in the first place.
またモラル、良し悪しも成り立たないわけですよ。
Yeah, same thing with morals. Like there's no way to even have any moral standard for what's good or bad either.
あなたの存在自体が単なる幻想になるわけです。
Like you're just kind of like this just existing blob of you just exist, and there's nothing about it that you can really say if there's no God.
皆さん、恋って魚じゃないですよ。fall in love のことですよ。恋しますよね。愛しますよね。
So not the fish, but like people who fall in love and like just like romantic stuff. Like that's a thing that people do.
そのような概念が存在するかどうかってどうしたら分かるんでしょうか？神がいなかったら。
So like if there is no God, how did we like to kind of determine that this is like a thing that's even there?
ある科学者たちは言いますよ。あなたのその感じていることは単なる科学的ケミカルな融合かなんかでバーンってなってそれをふんって感じてるそういう幻想に過ぎないとよく言いますよ。
And like a lot of times people will just kind of explain it the way of like, well, technically the only thing that's going on is like all the different neurons firing in your brain, and there's like a whole like chemical process that explains like the phenomenon of feeling like you're in love, and that's all it really is. It's
よく知ってますね。
just physical stuff in your brain.
はい、だからまず神の存在から始まる。はい、じゃあそれは分かりましたって言ったとしましょう。
Okay, so then let's say like this is something that actually has to come from God, and so let's just say, okay, we understand that.
じゃあなんでキリスト教の神じゃなくちゃいけないの？
So then why specifically the Christian God? Like what is unique about the Christian God?
はい、聞いてくれてありがとうございます。それいい質問です。
Yeah, so thanks for asking. That's a great question.
ね、クリスチャンの神は何て言いました？三位一体の神だって言いました。
And so another thing that's important that it says is that God is a triune God. There's three persons in
なん
one.
で三位一体じゃなくちゃいけないんでしょうか？
And why does it need to be three in one? Why does it
神
need to be a
様が
trinity?
一人ぼっちなら愛という概念が存在しないわけですね。自分の中に性質として存在しない。だから神であるキリスト教の神はすでに関係を性質的に持っている三位一体父子精霊、その中に愛がある。 そうじゃなければ神は愛であるという概念が成り立たないんです。
Yeah, because if God was just one person in the Trinity, if he was just by himself, then there would be no kind of way to actually have love or express love, because love requires a person, another person outside of yourself to love. And so if God is not, if he's just by himself, then he can't do that. So being in the Trinity, having other people to love, he's able to then like be in perfect love and community before other humans were created.
またなんで神は霊的な存在、目に見えない存在じゃなくちゃいけないんでしょうか。
And then why does God also need to be an invisible or kind of transcendent? Like why does he need to be invisible specifically?
こう考えてみてください。神が見える存在だったら、要は皆さんと同じ世界、制限、時間、原則に縛られている神になりますよね。
Yeah, but if God is not this transcendent and invisible God, then that means God is also in this physical world with the same kind of constraints that we have, all the different limitations like time and life and all these things. He would be the same as us in that sense.
要は神は超越してないことになります。
And so it means that he's not a transcendent God.
この2つを考えると、キリスト教の神はこうです。絶対なる超越した神であると同時に、パーソナル、めちゃくちゃ個人的な神でもあり得るわけです。
And so the Christian God, the thing that's unique about him is that he is this absolute transcendent, just like perfect God, just totally invisible, all these things, but at the same time, he's also this very personal and intimate God with each of us.
もっと言えます、この概念。もっと論理的に皆さんに提供できることができます。でもそこまでしません。
Yeah, we can go on and on about all of the different kind of logical inferences about God and what kind of person and being he is, but we're not going to like go super in depth about it today.
でもまず皆さんにしてほしいことは、信仰は単なる信じてください、何の根拠もなしに信じろと言ってるわけじゃないです。いや、ここに実際に哲学的にも事実があるから信じてと言ってるわけです。
And so basically the main point that we want to talk about today is that faith is not just like this random, like you just believe in some random thing that you don't have any proof of just because it's this, oh, you just have faith, but it's actually like there is a concrete like foundation for what we're believing in, and we want to talk about that today.
そしてここの3節、見えるものは見えないものから出てきたって生まれたっていう表現がありますよね。
Yeah, and then in verse 3 it also says like things in this universe were like made out of things that were not visible.
ヘブル語とギリシャ語では別の言い方をするとこうです。見えるものは何もないところから出てきたって表現を言います。out of nothing っていう言い方ができます。
Yeah, and in the Greek it's kind of this phrase of out of nothing that things were made.
要は神様はそれほど力強い、それほど絶対的な神であり、そして信仰によってそれを信じることができるって言ってるわけです。
Yeah, and it's saying that this is how powerful and how strong God is, and it's through faith that we're able to believe something like this.
信仰は皆さんがどれほど信じるかじゃないんです。まず
Yeah, first off is that faith, it's not something of like how strongly you believe in something.
信じる対象がどれほど確実かなんです。
Yeah, it's actually how assured and strong is the thing you are believing in, the object of that faith.
なぜでしょうか。
And so why is that?
こう考えてください。
Yeah, so here's an example.
はい、例えばですね、ある人が崖から落ちそうになってるとしましょう。
So let's say there's a person that's like hanging off a cliff and they're about to fall.
2人ごめんなさい。
two people.
はい、
Yeah.
2人とも木にぶら下がって落ちる寸前で
And
す。
they're both hanging off of like a tree, but it's about to break and they're about to fall down.
でもそこに岩があります。
But then there's like a cliff, kind of like a sturdy rock next to them on the
その
cliff.
でっかい岩、そして2人とも支えられます。その岩に飛び移れば落ちなくて済む。
Yeah, and it's this, like this very strong rock. If they both jump to this rock, it's very like firm and it will hold both of them and save them.
でも1人はこう思います。あの家じゃなくて岩、絶対大丈夫。絶対ジャンプすれば助かる。
And so one person says like that cliff, that little like thing right there, that looks like the perfect thing. If I jump on that, I will definitely be safe and I will not fall.
でもう1人はいやーちょっとわからない。いやちょっと怪しい。
And another person's like, well, yeah, I don't know. Like it looks, I can't tell for sure. Like it might not hold up. I
い
might
や
fall.
ーなんか多分崩れそう。
Yeah, like it looks like it might just break apart as soon as my body
で
pulls
も
onto it.
結果的に2人ともジャンプしてみました。
But then they both end up jumping to the rock.
どっちが救われました？
And so who's going to be saved? Like who's going to not fall because of this rock?
2人とも救われましたよ
Well,
ね。
they're both going to be saved.
なぜなら岩が確実かどうかの方が問題なわけですよ。
Yeah, it's because it's about whether the rock is actually firm. It's not about how strongly they believed the rock was firm.
またこういう例えもあります。
And there's also another way we can say this
皆さん
example.
モーゼの 杉越って概念覚えてますか？
Do you guys remember the idea of Passover with Moses?
はい、ね、モーゼがやってきてイスラエルの人たち、みんな言います。今夜死の天使がやってくると。Angel of death.
So yeah, Moses comes to all the people after talking with God, and it's like the last of the plagues, I think, and then he's like, yeah, so the angel of death is going to come tonight.
でもイスラエル人たちはみんな、ね、ドアに子羊の血を塗ってください。そうすればあなたの、長男は死ななくて済む。
And then, yeah, the whole thing of this angel of death coming is that it's going to kill the firstborn of each family. And so he says, well, if you take the blood of a lamb and paint it on your doorpost, then your firstborn will not die.
でもそこで鈴木さんと木村さんがいました。
And then Kimura-san and Suzuki-san were both there, and they heard
二
this.
人とも息子を持ってます。
And they both had sons.
鈴木さんはこう言います。いやー、モーゼうさんくさくない？
Yeah, and then Suzuki-san's like, yeah, like Moses, this guy's kind of weird. Like, why does he keep talking about this stuff? Like, it's kind of strange.
死の天使そんなの聞いたことないよ。そんなのやってくるわけないじゃん。
Angel of death? Like, come on, man. Like, that's so weird. Like, why are you talking about this?
まあちょっと今までのねその災いはまあ現実に起こったけどまぐれじゃん。
Like, yeah, like what? Like, this is such a weird thing. Like, I've never heard something like this happening before. Like, there's no way that would happen.
まあでもねうちの息子ちょっと死んでほしくないし、試してみようかな。
But like, okay, fine. Like, it's probably good that my son doesn't die. So like, just in case, I'll like do the thing.
でも木村さんはお前バカだろってねモーゼすごいリーダーだろ。神様もすごい働いてくれて信じなくちゃダメだよって言います。
Yeah, but then Kimura-san replies to him and is like, oh, like, dude, this is Moses. He's like our leader. He's like always talking with God directly. Like, he's our great leader. Like, why would you not listen to him?
二人とも結局ドアに血を塗りました。どっちが救われました？
Yeah, so they end up both putting the blood of the lamb on their doors. And so, who is the one who is saved? Who is the one whose son is not killed?
両方です。
Yeah, it's both.
だからイエス様言いましたよね。からし種のほどのサイズの信仰でいいんですと。
Yeah, that's why Jesus said, like, whoever has the faith of a mustard seed, like even the smallest seed, even if you have that faith, it's okay.
信仰の度合いじゃなくて対象が重要だからです。
It's not the degree of your faith, but the object of your faith.
はい。じゃあ信仰はただの論理的なものなんでしょうか？
So is faith just kind of this like, great, we figured it out, logical, good, let's go. Is it
いや
that it?
信仰はもっと深いもので
It's
す。
actually a deeper thing than that.
それは信仰はパーソナルなものだってこと
Yeah,
です。
and that's that faith is a personal thing.
信仰が本物なら私たちの個人的な人生に確実に影響しているはずなんです。
Yeah, so if faith is this real thing, like we're saying, then it was something that would really have a big effect and influence in our lives.
ここに神学者たちはこう言っています。これはヒーローの博物館だって言ってるわけです。旧約聖書のヒーローたちの博物館って言い方をしています。
A lot of great theologians talk about this passage of Hebrews, saying it's kind of like the hall of like the heroes of faith, and it's like this great part of the
彼ら
passage.
は神様をただ信じていただけではなくて、2番目の要素、神が報いてくださる方、神を求める者には報いてくださる方であるってことを信じて生きていた人たちです。
Yeah, these are people who not only just believe that God existed, obviously, but they also like there was something like they believed that God was going to reward them for their faith, and that was part of their faith.
悪魔ですら神様の存在を信じています。
Yeah, like obviously, for example, like the devil, he believes in God and believes in
で
everything
も
about God.
神様と歩んで関係を持ってますか？持ってません。
Yeah, but he doesn't have a personal relationship, and he's like walking with God.
要は神様を信じていない時点で悪魔よりもひどいんですよ。
Yeah, so it's actually like in a sense like worse than the devil if you're not even believing in God in the first place. Like even the devil believes all the true things about God.
でもそれだけじゃダメです。パーソナルに生きてなくちゃいけないってことです。
So it's not just like, oh, I believe all the correct things about God done, but it's actually more than that, having this personal relationship with Him.
どのようにパーソナルに信仰を影響するんでしょうか？
And so how can we actually have this personal relationship that is really affected by our
はい、
faith?
もうとてつもないリストのが長いリストなので、そう全部やりません。
And so, yeah, there's this huge list of all these people who were great examples of this. We can't go through all of them, but
ね、アベル、エノク、ノア、アブラハム、イサク、ヤコブ、ヨセフ、モーゼ、ラハブ、ギデオン、ダビデ、もっと出てきます。それ全部やりません。
yeah, it goes like Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Rahab, Gideon. There's like a ton of people.
でも今日読んだ3つだけやります。3人だけ、アベル、エノク、ノアだけ説明します。
And from that list, we're just going to today look at Abel, Enoch, and Noah.
はい、3つあります。
There's, yeah, three main people to talk
ま
about.
ず最初、アベル。
So the first one is Abel.
アベルの信仰はどのように現れてたんでしょうか？
So how did Abel's faith come out? Like how did we see his
それ
faith?
は彼の礼拝、ワーシップに影響してました。
I think the main thing for him was his worship of God was the main.
それは
where we
ル
saw
カス
his
が
faith.
先週メッセージしたルカスだっけルカスですね。はい。先週そんなにありません。もちろん。
Yeah, and so yeah, we talked about a little bit last week just how his about the idea of his worship was the way we saw his faith.
はい。まずクリスチャンとして信仰を持っているなら、あなたの神様への礼拝の態度に現れるわけです。
And so if you are a Christian and believing all these true things about God, your kind of posture and just as a person is going to naturally come out as somebody who is a worshiper of God.
それはカインのように神を利用する、神に何かすれば祝福させてもらえるんじゃないかってそういうものじゃありません。
Yeah, so it's not like Cain where they just thought like, oh, like this God, he made everything, he seems pretty powerful, I could use him and I could like get more good things for myself. It's not like that.
いや、何もない時に、何も祝福もない時に、むしろリスク、利益も何もない時に、リスクしかない時に神を礼拝してますか？
Yeah, so are you
という
guys
ことです。
Yeah, it's this thing that Abel did that is the challenge is he was able to worship God even when there was no actual benefit to him for doing so, or even maybe even a risk to him for worshiping God. He was able to do that.
要は私たちの礼拝は私たちのパフォーマンス、どれほど礼拝するにかかってますか？それとも神様のキャラクター、神様の性質、神様の偉大さにかかってますかってことです。
Yeah, so it's this question of like, is our faith connected to like our performance and how well we're able to have that faith, or is it connected to how great God is and wanting to worship Him?
アベルは給料がいっぱいにならないときに先にベストを捧げましたよね。要は初歩、ベストなものを捧げたわけです。何もその確証がないときに神様を信頼して捧げました。
Yeah, Abel would give, even he wasn't like this rich guy, but he would still give his first fruits to God. He would give the first thing he got to God directly, even if he didn't know that what the next one was going to be.
皆さんにチャレンジです。
So this is a challenge to all of us, I think.
特にこのコロナの時代、礼拝すること自体がリスクであり、大変チャレンジです。
Yeah, so I think especially in like the COVID era, like coming to worship together can be like a risk and a challenge for a lot of people.
どうあなたの信仰、生き方に礼拝に現れていますでしょうか、この時代に。
So how does worship come out in our walk of faith in this era?
コロナの時代になってもちろん分かります。ここに来ればリスクがあります。
Yeah, of course, like during COVID coming here, during this time, like there is a risk.
利益よりもリスクの方が多いです。
Yeah.
失うものの方が多いです。
Yeah, probably there's more that we could lose than gain, like just in that sense of like there's a risk coming here more than there is like a reward in a sense.
その事実自体があなたがどれほど一緒に礼拝したり、別にもちろん個人的にも礼拝できます。でもクリスチャンライフスタイルがかなり影響してしまってますか？
So is that really affecting kind of your life and your kind of faith and worship life in this time? Like obviously you can worship alone at home, but like is that affecting the way that you come to church?
正直に言います。多くのクリスチャンが本当にこの分野で試されてますよ。
Yeah, I think to say really clearly, I think a lot of Christians are being challenged in this sphere of life
ア
right
メリカ
now.
の統計では 30% の人たちがもう教会にすら行かなくなってます。なぜでしょうか？もう利益がないからです。行く利益がないんですよ。
Yeah, I think in America there was like a stat that about 30% of Christians stopped going to church for the reason, oh, it's not like beneficial to me anymore.
なぜでしょうか？もう教会に今まではね、教会に行くことである程度の利益があったわけです。例えば良い人間だと思われる。
Yeah, like up until that point, there was kind of like good like reasons or benefits for people to go to church. For example, like, oh, well, it makes me look like I'm a good person.
良いコネクション、ネットワーク、いろんな人たちが来るので良いコネができる。
Yeah, I can network with other people. I can make good connections.
特にアメリカとかでは社会的ステータスっていうそういうのはありますよね。クリスチャンであるか、要は宗教的かどうかな、そうでないかで結構人の見方が変わってくる社会でした。
Yeah, maybe not as much here, but like in America, for example, it like makes you kind of look better in your social standing if you are a religious or faith person or having kind of a
で
Christian.
も今の時代逆ですよ。
Yeah,
もう
but,
教会に行ってること自体でバッシング受けますよね。あなた何やってんのとか言われますよ。
yeah, but now it's like totally the opposite. If you go to church and there's this big group of people, everyone's like, well, what are you doing? Like, that's not safe.
日本人もある意味そういうチャレンジを受けています。
Yeah, in a sense, Japanese people are also kind of experiencing this
コロ
challenge.
ナが行かなくていい理由になっちゃってるんです。
Yeah, so it's like kind of the excuse to get out of anything. Just like, oh, well, I'm afraid of COVID, so I'm just not going to go to anything.
皆さんが全て失った時に、神様を信じて生きること自体に何の利益もない時に、まだ神様信じますか？
Yeah, so if you were able to, if you just like lost everything and there was completely no benefit and even actually harm to yourself and you lost everything, would you still be able to come to God and worship Him?
昔の人たちは信仰のために牢獄に行きました。
Yeah, a lot of these people in the past, they actually would go to jail and be thrown in jail because of their faith.
今の時代の人たち、信仰のために教会にすら来ません。
Yeah, like now,
Must.
yeah, I think a lot of people now today, it's like, well, they won't even just come to church.
深刻な問題だと思います。
Yeah, so I think it's really a problem of faith.
教
Like
会
this
だ
is
け
where
じ
it
ゃない
comes
です。
from.
スモールグループ、コミュニティ、信仰が礼拝、あなたの行動に現れてますかっていうことがチャレンジです。
Yeah, I think this is really a challenge. It's not just like the programs that the church has. I think it's something that really comes from the faith that we have, and it's affecting how we live the
僕
Christian
も
life.
10年前、究極的なその状態を経験しました。僕は使命そのものっていうのかな、ものを失った時期がありました。
Yeah, and Pastor Rita also experienced a very similar thing where with this old church where he kind of lost his total sense of calling and mission.
自分が活躍できている環境、メッセージできる環境、神様のために生きてるんだって思える環境自体がなくなった、そういう経験をしました。
Yeah, he experienced losing all of his kind of position of being in a place where he's serving a lot, giving messages, having a lot of influence in ministry, and he lost all of that.
そこで神様にチャレンジされたことはこうです。お前は使命がなくてもそれでも私を信じるかってことです。
And he was challenged like from God saying to him like even if you don't have a specific calling, will you still be able to worship and love me?
私で十分かって
Yeah,
チャレンジされました。
Yeah, God was really saying to him, I am enough for you, just me.
皆さんどうでしょうか。
And so how about for you guys?
2番目、エノク。
And the next person is Enoch.
エノク、あんまそんな説明出てきません、聖書で。
Yeah, there's not a ton about him in the Bible.
まあ、もし知りたいなら創世記の5章22節、24節読んでみてください。
Yeah, but there is a little bit about him in Genesis 5:22 and 24. If you
は
want
い、エ
to
ノ
check
ク
it
は
out.
自分の生き方で何て書いて5節、神を喜ばせたってあります。
Yeah, and it says that he, in verse 5 of the Hebrews passage, it says that he pleased God. His walk with God was pleasing.
どうやって神様を喜ばせたんでしょうか。
And so how did he do that?
はい、創世記の5章に書いてあります。エノクは神様と共に歩んだって書いてあります。
It says that he walked with God in Genesis.
どういうことでしょうか。
And what is
私た
this?
ちみんな神様と一緒に歩いてますよね。歩んでますよ
I
ね
mean,。we're all walking with God, right? Like, what does that mean? He walked with God.
実はこの歩む、歩くっていう言葉、エデンの3章ですね。神様がエデンのその歩き回れていたっていう言葉と全く同じ表現です。
It's actually the same exact expression and same word as in Genesis when it says God was walking around in the garden.
要は、まあ想定できると思うんです。めちゃくちゃ親密な関係ですよ。
Yeah, I think we can kind of imagine it's a very kind of intimate walk with God.
でも、エノクはそれだけじゃないです。ユダの手紙にこうが書いてあります。14節、15節。
And also it says in Jude 1:14 through 15, it wasn't just this thing about Enoch.
エノクは預言者だったって言ってます。
It also says in this Jude passage that he was a prophet.
どういうふうに預言者だったんでしょうか。
And so how was he a prophet? Like, what
こ
did
の
he
よう
actually
に
do?
このように説明します。エノクはその時代の神に不従順だった人たちに対して裁きが来るよ、このままじゃダメだよってずっと言っていた人だったってことです。
It says that he was actually, when he was walking with God, he was also constantly talking to these disobedient people and telling them like, hey, there's going to be punishment, there's going to be judgment if you keep disobeying.
エノク350年ぐらい生きました。
And he did this for about 300 years.
300年間ずっとそれやってたんですよ。
And just completely 300 years straight, he just did the same thing.
要はこういうことです。エノクは私神様と一緒に歩む生きるじゃあねって言って孤立してなんかひっそり修行僧みたいに生きてた人じゃないです。
Yeah, he's not like this guy who was just like, oh, well, I only need God, I don't need anyone else, I'm just going to go live off with God by myself, like see you later, and just go off onto a mountain and pray until he died. That's not what he did.
もちろん神と歩んで神との親密な祈り、聖書も読んでたと思います。御言葉も聞いてたと思います。でもそれ以上に彼は人々の中で、人々にもしかしたら嫌われてたかもしれません。人々の中で神を宣言し続けた人です。
Yeah, so maybe, yeah, I'm sure he did these things where he walked with God and he was in the Word and praying by himself at times, but he was also with people and amongst people, and maybe even hated by people because he was always trying to tell them and warn them, hey, there's going to be judgment coming, and so that's the kind of life that he lived.
エノクの人生のテーマ、一言で言ったら relationship、関係だと思います。
And if we can say in one word to sum up his life, it was relationship.
神との関係、そして人々との関係。
A relationship with God and also with people around him.
ただ愛するだけじゃなくて真理を持って愛する生き方をしたと思い
And
ま
it
す。
wasn't just like, oh, I love you, you're great, but it was like really loving people with the truth.
皆さん多分頭でリンクし始めてると思います。Worship、relationship。 はい。
Yeah, maybe you guys have seen the link already. With Abel, it was worship, and with Enoch, it's relationship.
皆さんの神様との関係はどうでしょうか。
And so, how about for all of us? Like, how is our relationship with
もし
God?
皆さんの神様との関係が固く親密なものなら人間関係に絶対現れているべきです。
Yeah, if our relationship is something that's actually really strong and really intimate, then that's going to naturally play out in our other relationships with
皆さんの
people.
コミュニティグループに反映されていると思います。
That's something that's going to be really reflected in our times in community group.
なぜならイエス・キリストもこういうふうに旧約聖書の律法を訳したからです。神を愛し人々を隣人を愛すること、それが一番重要な戒めですよ。2つ言いました。
Yeah, and this is like even what Jesus said as like the most important commandment that kind of sums up all of the law and the prophets, which is just to love God and love your neighbor.
別の言い方をするとこうです。あなたは人を愛することに意図的になっていますかってことです。
Another way to say it is that he kind of asked, like, is your love of people, are you doing it intentionally? Are you actually going out and seeking other people to love?
クリエイティブになってますか、人を愛することに。
Yeah, are you actually thinking of creative ways to love people?
行動的に人々を愛してますか。
Are you actually taking action to go out and do that?
意図的に彼らのニーズを把握していますか。
Yeah, are you actually intentionally trying to see, like, what is each person's individual
意
need?
図的に教会のニーズを把握していますか。
Yeah, are you doing that with the church? Kind of intentionally seeing, like, how does the church need help right now?
意図的にあなたの職場の人たちのニーズ、または意図的に神様のことをあなたの職場で伝えようとしていますか。
Yeah, are you intentionally seeing what are the needs of people in my workplace, or am I taking what God is saying and intentionally sharing that with people at my workplace?
3番目、ノア。
And then the third person is Noah.
ノアの人生のテーマは何でしょうか。
So what would be the theme of Noah's life?
6章、創世記6章7章見てみると彼のテーマわかると思います。
If we look at Genesis 6 and 7, I think that theme will come out pretty clearly.
みんなこの中ちょっと暑い。僕めちゃくちゃ暑いんだけども。
Yeah,
ちょっとエアコン
is it hot in here? Maybe no.
暑いってね、みんなおーってなってくから。
Everyone looks like it's a little bit hot, I guess.
はい。もう消しちゃっていいです。多分大丈夫だと思います。寒い、逆に寒い人。
Anybody cold in here?
OK。はい。ノア。
Okay, back to
ノア
Noah.
ノアのストーリーを見てみると何度もこの言葉が出てきます。神様はこのように命じた。そしてノアは従った。そういうような表現が何度も出てきます。
In the story of Noah, these kind of expressions of God commanded this and then Noah did it, these kind of expressions come out a
神
lot.
様はこのように言われた。そしてそれがこうなった。
God said, do it like this, and then Noah did it like that.
ノアの人生のテーマは従順さです。
Yeah, so we could say for Noah, his theme is kind of obedience and stewardship and following God.
自分のスキル、自分の時間、すべて何十年も箱舟作りに費やしたわけです。
Yeah, he used his skills and his time over like decades to build the ark.
誰も信じてくれないときに、
Yeah, even when nobody believed that God was going to send the flood.
バカにされているときに、
Yeah, it was totally just made fun of the whole time.
どのように皆さん自分のスキル、時間使ってますか。
So how about us? How are we using the skills that we have?
これはスチュワードシップ、要は仕事、私たちの知るべき使命、そういうものにかかってくると思い
Yeah,
ま
I
す。
think this is related to stewardship and using our gifts towards our calling that maybe God has given us.
これもう何度もやったことです。だから先ほど言いました、これまとめです。
Yeah, so we've done this, we have talked about all these things before, and so that's why we're saying today is kind of like summing up and recapping on all of these things.
でも僕が言いたいことは、この時代だからこそ信仰を表してほしいなと思います。
And I think we're talking about it again specifically because in this kind of era and world that we're living in today, it's really important to really have faith come out in our lives and to be
私た
shown
ち
to
の
those
特に
around
日
us.
本やアメリカの問題は迫害じゃないです。
Yeah, I think for Japan and for America, other places, I don't think that persecution is per se our main problem.
でも私たちのレイズネスだと思います。
In a kind
怠けてる状
of
態。
reverse sense, it could be just that we're lazy in a sense.
心地よすぎるんです。
Yeah, it's just too comfortable at times.
大きなニーズもないんです。
We don't really have any like big needs that we don't
も
have
ち
or
ろん
anything.
ウクライナやウルグル人だとかの人たち、彼らは迫害そういうものをもっと厳しい状況に生きています。
Yeah, there's a lot of people who, as we know, maybe people in Ukraine or the Uyghurs in China that are experiencing a lot harder life right now.
中国の状況もそうですよね。クリスチャンたちまだひどい状況下にいます。
Yeah, even just the Christians in China, it's very difficult for them still.
でも知ってますか、彼らの信仰すごいです。
Yeah, but if you guys know, like their faith is really great. Their faith is crazy.
厳しい時にこそ、そのようなもう身体的にも厳しい時にこそクリスチャンの本当の信仰って試され現れるからです。
And it's in these times of like having your faith tested by all these trials around you. That's when your like faith can really be tested as this real faith or not.
コロナにビビってる場合じゃないんです、私たち。
Yeah, like are we just being like this isn't just something that we can be like afraid of just from
もちろん
corona.
コロナを無視しろって言ってるわけじゃないです。
Yeah, it's not saying just like ignore corona and like don't take any precautions. We're not saying that.
でもどれほどそれが自分の信仰に影響してしまっているか気づいてください。
But yeah, it's something that we just want you guys to all realize how is corona, how is this era that we're now living in affecting your faith and your lifestyle with God.
はい、皆さんこれを聞いて、はい、分かりました。神様信じてみたいと思います。でもね、ここまでこんな人たちのように大胆に生きれるかどうか分かりませんっていうかもしれません。
And so you might say like, okay, well, great, I've understood the things about faith and like it's logical, it's personal, and all these people who did it, like, great, they did it, but like, how can I do that like the way that
そ
they
こま
did?
でそこまで大胆になれませんと。
Yeah, I don't know if I could be as bold as these people. Like they're in the Bible.
大丈夫です。ちゃんと答えがあります。
Yeah, no, it's okay. Like there is an answer to that as well.
それが3番目。
And that is the third point.
はい、ヘブルの戻ります。11の39から40、聖書出してもらってもいいですか。
And we're going back to Hebrews 11, 39 through 40.
はい、こう書いてあります。これらの人たちはその信仰によって称賛されましたが、約束されたものを手に入れることがありませんでした。神は私たちのためにもっと優れたものを用意しておられたので、私たちを抜きにして、私たちのこと言ってますよ。彼らが完全なものとされることはなかったのですって言ってます。
And these passages says, and all these, though commended through their faith, this list of people, they did not receive what was promised, since God had provided something better for us, that apart from us, they should not be made perfect.
はい、ここの登場人物、みんな旧約聖書の登場人物、ある共通点がいくつかあります。
So all of these people coming out in this hall of faith, all these famous people from the Old Testament, they have all something things in common.
まず最初、彼らの信仰は弱さを通して、無力さを通して現れたことです。
And the first one is that their faith came out through their weakness, through their powerlessness.
アベル死にました。
Yeah, some of them died.
そうですよね。でもアベルの血はまだ語ってるって言っています。
Yeah, but then it says Abel, like, he died, but his blood is still speaking out from the ground.
ノア、先ほども言いました。バカにされました。
Yeah, for Noah, he was just made fun of the entire time.
狂った人だと思われました。
Yeah, people thought he was crazy.
カウンセリング行った方がいいんじゃないのって言われたと思い
Yeah,
ます。
people were like, you should go to counseling. You should get that checked out. That's what
大
people
丈夫
said.
アブラハムはもうかなり裕福な人でした。
Yeah, for Abraham, like he was actually a pretty well-off, wealthy guy.
そうですね。自分の家も故郷も全部もらってたんです。いいものもらってました。
Yeah, like he had his house, he had his whole like pasture, all these animals, he had all this stuff.
そして神様言います。約束の地に出て行きなさい。
And then God just came up to him and was like, okay, go to the promised land.
どこ？
He's like, what? I don't know where that is.
後で見せますよ。
And then God's like, oh, I'll tell you as you go. I'll tell you later.
はい。お前に息子が生まれるよって神様アブラハムに言います。
And then God says to him, you're going to have a son. You're going to have a child.
私90歳ぐらいなんですけども、妻ももうかなり年寄ってるんですけども、どうやって？
And then Abraham just responds like, well, I'm like 90 something now and my wife is too. Like, how is that going to happen?
そのうちわかるよ。
And then God's just like, oh, you'll find out. Like, I'll tell you when it happens.
そしてやっと子供が生まれました。
And then finally they did have a son.
あなたの子供を生贄として捧げなさい。
And then God says to him after that, now please sacrifice your son to me.
なんで？
I'm like, why?
後で見せるよ。
And, I'll tell you later. You will find out in time.
ずっとそんな感じでした。
It's always like this kind of, like, always like this for him.
私たちもそうじゃないですか。
Yeah, aren't we kind of the same?
僕に言われました。教会開拓しなさい。
Yeah, like for Pastor Rita, he was said like, okay, go plant a church.
お金も人材もありません。
It doesn't really have any people or resources to do that, but
どうやって？
how am I supposed to do that?
後でわかりますよ。
And then it's so very similar, like you will find out in
どん
time.
な教会にすればいいんですか？
Like what kind of church should I make?
神学的知識もあんまりないです。
Like
後でわかるよ。
I don't have like a ton of like theological knowledge. Oh, like you will learn that in time.
コロナ始まっちゃいました。どうしましょう
Okay, well, now it's COVID. What do we do?
どのように教会やりましょう
Like, how do we do church in this era of COVID?
後でわかるよ。
Yeah, we'll find out in time. As that comes, we'll find out.
皆さんの人生どうでしょうか
So, how about in all of our own lives?
その中で彼らは常に自分たちの人生のテーマにしがみつきました。
Yeah, so all of these people, they all had this theme and this promise that they were always focused on and had their faith in.
アブラハムにとってはもちろん息子というテーマです。
Yeah, for Abraham, this theme for him was like the theme of having a son.
ノアは裁きと洪水ですよね。
Yeah, so Noah was like the punishment and the judgment and the flood.
アベルにとっては自分の血という象徴です。
And then for Abel, it's kind of like the symbol of his blood.
全部このテーマ、ある人物につながっています。
Yeah, and all of these people, all of these themes are connected to one person.
アベルの血は何の象徴でしょうか。イエス・キリストの血の象徴です。
And so, what about Abel's blood? Like that is a symbol of the blood of Christ.
裁
Of
きと
Jesus.
洪水、何の象徴でしょうか。昨日洗礼式がありました。洗礼の象徴でもあります。
Yeah, and so for the flood and for the judgment of the flood, that is also like we had a baptism yesterday, and so this in a sense can be connected to baptism and the kind of symbol of that.
アブラハムの息子という象徴、何でしょうか。で自分の息子を捧げなくちゃいけない神が本当の自分の息子を捧げたイエス・キリストの象徴ですよね。
For Abraham, for having his son and having to give up his son and sacrifice his son, this is obviously very connected to God giving up his one and only son for us.
みんなそのように信仰、約束を信じて生き抜いたんです。
And all of these people, they lived all the way and they lived completely with just faith in these promises of God.
あなたの人生のテーマはどのようにイエス・キリストにつながっていますか。
And so for all of us, how is the theme of our life? How is that connected to Jesus?
私たちはもっといい立場にいます。彼らは経験しなかったんです。
Yeah,
約束しているものを与えられなかったと書いてあります。
Yeah, it says like we're actually in a better position than they are because it says that the things that they were promised were not actually given to them yet. So they didn't even get to experience that.
私たちも与えられています。
Yeah, but for us, it's already been given to us.
ヘブルの12の1から3読んでみましょ
Yeah, so let's go back and look at Hebrews again.
う。12、1 to 3。
12, 1 to 3.
はい。日本語だけで読みます。こういうわけでこの多くの証人たちが雲のように私たちを取り巻いているのですが、私たちも一切の重荷とまとわりつく罪を捨てて自分の前に置かれている競争レースですね。それを忍耐を持って走り続けようではありませんか。信仰の創始者であり完成者であるイエスから目を離さないでいなさい。この方がご自分の前に置かれた喜びのために恥ずかしめをものともせずに十字架を忍び、神の御座の右の座に着座されたのです。あなた方は罪人たちのご自分に対するこのような反抗を耐え忍ばれたことを考えなさい。あなた方の心が元気を失い疲れて果ててしまわないようにするためです。イエス・キリストが私たちの信仰を完成させてくださった人です。
So Jesus is the one who perfects our faith.
ある意味、私たちにかかってないんです。
Yeah, in a sense, it's not really about us. It doesn't have anything to do with us.
新約聖書でこのような人たちがいました。
There was this kind of person in the New Testament.
マルコの9の23に出てきます。あるお父さんが出てきます。
So it's in Mark 9. There's this father of a child.
彼は自分の子供を癒してほしかったんです。
And he wanted to have his child healed. His
イエ
child
ス・キ
was
リストの
sick.
ところに来ます。
And then he goes to Jesus.
そしてこう言います。あなたがもしできるなら私の息子を癒せます。癒してください。
And he says like to Jesus, if you are able to heal my son, then please do that.
で、イエス・キリストは言います。できるなら信じる者には何でもできるんだよ。
And Jesus is like, if I can, anything can happen if you believe that I can do it.
そして彼こう言います。私の不信仰、私の信仰のなさを助けてくださいって言います。
And then the guy says in response like, Lord, I believe, but help my unbelief.
それでいいんです。
And even that is okay.
要は自分が信仰を持ってないっていう事実、そして信仰が必要だっていう事実を認めることがまずスタートです。
Yeah, so even if you can just admit that you don't really have any faith, just as a start, like that can be the beginnings of faith.
またある女性、カナン人の女性が、マタイの26章で26節でこのように出てきます。
And then also in Matthew 15, 26, yeah, there's another lady who
彼
comes
女は
out.
イスラエル人ではありません。自分の娘が悪霊に取りつかれてイエス・キリストのもとに来ます。
And she's she's a foreigner, she's a Gentile, and she's has evil spirits around her and all of this.
のどうだね。
Or her daughter is, yeah.
そして癒してくださいってイエス・キリストに言います。
And then she also comes to Jesus and says, like, please heal my daughter who has these evil
そしてイエ
spirits.
ス・キリストこう言うんです。イスラエルの人たちの食事からパンを取り上げて犬にあげるのはいけないことだって言います。
And Jesus actually responds like, should we take the bread of the Israelites and give that to the dogs? Kind of
何を言
referring
っ
to
て
her
るん
as
で
a
しょう
dog.
か。あなた外国人ですよね。違法人ですよね。なんで私がそれしなくちゃいけないんですか。ユダヤ人の私がなぜあなたにそれしなくちゃいけないんですかって意地悪するんです。ある意味
Yeah,
意地悪
and so Jesus like responds to her like, well, like, hey, you're a foreigner, you're a Gentile, like I'm Jewish, like why do I have anything to do with you in this? Like, why are you even asking me in this in the first place?
でも彼女の言ったことすごいです。
But then what she replied with was actually really cool.
彼女こう言ったんです。でもね、はい、そうですよ。でも犬ですら子供たちのこぼれたテーブルから机からこぼれたパンくずをいただきますっていうわけです。
Yeah, but she said, like, yeah, you're right, but even the dogs can have the crumbs that fall from the table that spill over.
要は彼女こう言ってるんです。はい、そうです。私は外国人です。そしてあなたにこれをしてもらう権利もありませんって言ってます。
Yeah, she's basically saying to him, like, yeah, you're right, I am a foreigner, I am a Gentile, I don't have any right to ask this.
で
of
も
you.
ね、この事実は私にかかってませんって。
And she's acknowledging, like, this actually doesn't have anything to do with me.
私がユダヤ人であるか、いい人間かどうか関係ない。
It doesn't have whether or not to do if I'm Jewish or am I a good person or not. It's
私
not
が
about
犬である
that.
かどうか関係ない。
If I'm a dog or not, it doesn't matter if that's me or not.
なぜならあなたが素晴らしい方だか
And it's actually because Jesus, you're awesome. That's why I can ask this.
ら。あ
of
なた
you.
ができるから。
Yeah, it's because you can do it.
何をしてるんでしょうか。
And so what is she doing?
確実な土台に望みをかけてるんです。
She's putting her hope on a completely firm foundation.
私じゃない、あなたが素晴らしいからお願いしますと。
Yeah, it's not because I'm great. It's because I want to put my faith in this awesome, in this perfect Jesus.
今日信仰を取り戻してください。
Yeah, so please come back to real faith today.
自分がどうのこうのじゃないです。イエス・キリストが素晴らしいからイエス・キリストに頼り続けてください。
Yeah, it's not how good you are at understanding and grasping on faith. It's what you're grasping at, which
そ
is
して
Jesus.
イエス・キリストの十字架と復活が絶対なる証拠です。
Yeah, and the proof of that is the death and resurrection of Jesus. That's the firm proof and foundation of your
十
faith.
字架でイエス・キリストが死んだイコール神様はめちゃくちゃパーソナルな神様です。めちゃくちゃ愛し、そして私たちをケアして私たちを思っている神だってわかると思います。
I think from that we can see that God is this truly powerful God who loves us and wants to care for us in every deep and personal way.
そしてイエス・キリストが死から復活したということは神は全てを超越している神だってわかるはずです。
And then we can also learn from this that because Jesus died, but then also rose from the dead, that he is not only that, but also this transcendent, perfect God.
神様は自分の一番大切な息子を与えるほどあなたとの関係を持ちたいんです。
Yeah, God wants to know you so much that he gave up his only son for you.
でも同時に神様はとてつもなく絶対なる主権者でありまた超越した神であるがゆえに死ですら問題ないってことです。
Yeah, but because he's such a absolute and transcendent and powerful God, even death would not stop him from that.
そこまでの証拠をもらってながらなぜ信じることができないんでしょうか。
Yeah, and so if we have the proof of something so great as that, can we, even have faith in something like that? I think starting with faith in that is something that
今
we can do.
日その信仰を一緒に体験していきましょう。
And so, let's really come back to faith and experience this faith in trust in God today.
生産式を通してそれを体験していきます。
And so we want to do that through communion today.